Welcome to what I'd say has been a video long in the making that might not make sense at first, but definitely will as we progress through the video. Today we have a camera comparison between three carefully selected Samsung smartphones that represent all the categories users might be interested in. On the budget end of the spectrum, we have the Samsung Galaxy A31, the Galaxy A51 representing the mid-range part, and the Samsung Galaxy Note 20 on the flagship end of the spectrum. Why these three phones specifically? Well, the Galaxy A31 is the best overall Samsung budget phone you can buy for the features and performance on a tight budget right now. The Galaxy A51 is the best mid-range Samsung phone as seen in how it's topped sales this year, and for the bashing that the Note 20 has gotten since its launch, it's still a flagship phone and has a camera perfect for this test. Well, that and the fact that it's been in my pocket for the past few weeks now. So how are we going to do this test? First, this test will be constrained to camera modes that are available on all three phones to keep it as fair as possible. Second, for each test category, we're going to award points to each phone. Best performance in that test gets 3 points, second gets 2 points, last being acceptable performance gets 1 point. And in the end, we'll do a tally and then dissect the results. As always, I installed the latest software updates on all three phones, turned off any beauty modes, cleaned off any camera smudges prior to taking these sample shots, and didn't tinker around with the AI settings and just let the cameras do their thing. That said, if you're stoked for this video, please hit that like button, and if you're new here, a sub to the channel will be incredible. To start this off, let's quickly get you up to speed on the camera specs on our phones. On the Samsung Galaxy A31, you get a 48 megapixel f2.2 wide-angle lens, an 8 megapixel f2.2 ultra-wide lens, a 5 megapixel f2.2 macro lens, a 5 megapixel f2.4 depth sensor, and a 20 megapixel f2.2 wide-angle selfie camera. On the Galaxy A51, you get a 48 megapixel f2.2 wide-angle lens, 12 megapixel f2.2 ultra-wide lens, a 5 megapixel f2.4 macro lens, a 5 megapixel f2.2 depth sensor, and a single 32 megapixel f2.2 wide selfie shooter up front. Lastly, on the Galaxy Note 20, you get a 12 megapixel f1.8 wide angle lens, a 64 megapixel 2.2 telephoto lens, a 12 megapixel f2.2 ultra wide lens, and a 10 megapixel f2.2 wide selfie camera. The selfies shot on these phones straight out the gate are good. They're pleasing to the eye, they feel rich, detailed, and none is struggling with clarity. The first thing you notice with all three samples side by side is the difference in color temperature. The A31 samples have cooler temperatures, similar to the A51, and the Note 20 puts out warmer images. Consequently, that color temperature variation influences how you perceive the tones of the colors of the objects in focus. Example in this set of samples here, focus your attention on the color of the hoodie and the mask. The Galaxy A31 captured the hoodie color as it is, but slightly undersaturated the color of the mask. The Galaxy A51 took away the punch from the hoodie and really oversaturated the mask to this unnatural color, and the Note 20 also undersaturated the hoodie but captured the color of the mask as it is. Skin tone also looks different on all three phones, and one thing to note is how the Galaxy A51 has this sort of purple tint over its photos, and that takes away from the quality of the shot. Portrait selfies shot on all three phones are impressive, to say the least, especially considering how they are mapping out the edge of the subject, relying utterly on software. Also, I noted that all three cameras can now find your face in portrait mode even with your mask on. I showed these three pictures to someone without the labels and told them to rank the quality, and they ranked the A31 first, the Note 20 second, and A51 third. That's a perfect segue for the selfie scores. The A31 takes the win for me, since it keeps colors and the skin as natural as possible, and color temperature adds to how you perceive the aesthetic of the photos. Everything about it just feels more natural and consistent, down to the blur of the portrait selfies. The Note 20 comes second with accurate color science and sticking to true flagship camera roots. And the A51 third because of how it oversaturated some colors and the purple tints over its surface. Let's talk about front-facing video. The Galaxy A31 can't do 4K front video, so these samples were shot at 1080p 30 frames per second. Here is where I'll say the A51 camera hasn't aged well at all. Previously, when I compared it to the Galaxy A71, it performed better than said A71 in terms of image temperature, colors, exposure balance, and saturation. Now, not so much. It really struggles balancing exposure, and there's this intense skin color warping as you start moving around. It really oversaturates the colors, giving them a really unnatural look and feel compared to the other two that just did their thing while composed and keeping focus on you. Quality on the A31 and Note 20 is similar and doesn't change when you start moving around. In terms of audio quality, the video itself is pretty... I like the Note 20 because it's more natural. It feels more me, and on both phones don't allow you to switch focal length in your videos. Very interesting. Let me get to see how this looks in post and talk to me about that audio quality. So the Note 20 takes max points for front-facing video, followed by the A31 and lastly the A51. Total tally currently ties the A31 and the Note 20 in first with 5 points each, and the Galaxy A51 at 2 points. Onwards to the rear cameras. The wide 48 megapixel shooter on the Galaxy A31 and Galaxy A51 and the 12 megapixel shooter on the Galaxy Note 20 bring out some pretty impressive shots. They're consistent in color accuracy, detail, and sharpness, with nothing blown out of the shot. They're so similar that when you put some shots side by side, it's pretty hard to tell the difference. Also, HDR coupled with individual color sans configurations will vary across all phones and affect how you perceive dynamic range. Case in point, the colors of these playground shots are more punchy on the Note 20 compared to those on the A31 and A51. The A31 and A51 have a 48 megapixel mode that allows you to take pictures with the whole capability of the lens. On the Galaxy A51, you can snap high resolution photos in quick progression. You hit the shutter button, the picture is taken, but you can't snap another photo up until the current photo you just took finishes processing in the background. On the A31, you can't use the camera completely up until it finishes processing the image you just took, so that's something worth noting. Here, we can't award points according to quality because quality across all phones is just fantastic. So for HDR and overall color accuracy and pleasantness, the Note 20 bags all 3 points and 2 points each for the A31 and A51. For the latter, because they have the same lens that performs similarly on both phones. Let's talk ultra-wide. In scenery shots like this one here, we can see that all phones handle dynamic range really well, with not much color temperature difference. The difference comes in how the AI scene optimizer across all phones brings out the punch in colors. Example, focus your attention on the hedge in these shots. The hedge on the A31 and the Galaxy Note 20 gets a darker contrast compared to the A51 that added quite some vibrance to the hedge. Not a glitch of any sort, just a difference in how these phones do image processing. Put a human subject in the shot, and each phone puts out different skin tones of the subject. Is it a big problem? Not really. But the more you look at the photos side by side, the more you pick out differences, like how these phones process the black outfit, or the edge fringing in the A51 shot. Also, can you guys note how the Galaxy A51 really cleaned the floor? The phones do a good job with depth mapping, but here, the Note 20 takes the cake no matter how you look at it. The A31 and the A51 really struggle with the exposure balance, as seen in how the A31 overexposed the background, and how the Galaxy A51 reduces the subject exposure so much to a point where the subject in my case appears darker than he is. The Note 20 hits exposure, color balance, and edge mapping on point, all through, and allows two focal perspectives in portrait mode. Ultra wide and wide. On portrait shots that have objects that stand out in the scenery, like this heart here, the A31 and A51 struggle to map out the edges and keep focus on the object. The A31 just washed out the whole shot, pouring the blur everywhere. The A51 will constrain most of the blur in the background, but some of that spills onto the object in focus. But the Note 20 does a stellar job that gives it max points in portrait mode. That's followed closely behind by the A51 and the Galaxy A31 getting 1 point. Now, Maskgate. I've got a friend on Instagram who brought my attention to how wearing a mask hampers how the phones process or optimize shots of faces. Upon further testing, I discerned that on rear camera shots, the difference is either negligible or issues won't be experienced if you give the phones enough time to focus on the subject. However, when you turn to the front-facing camera, the difference cannot be ignored. On the Galaxy A31, the mask helps balance exposure, makes the shot feel optimum and more natural. The Galaxy A51 also experienced the same phenomena, but here, with the mask on, there's still some overexposed bits in the foreground, like the t-shirt and the skin. Then, on the Galaxy Note 20, the difference is quite negligible. Here are video samples shot in 1080p 30 frames per second.
How my monetization process was. Getting monetized on YouTube isn't what it seems. It's not as easy as it looks, and it's not for the weak-hearted because of the many rejections you get. I got rejected 5 times before I was accepted into the YPP. 5 whole times. That's a lot of times to be rejected, and I'm also going to be talking to you about the gray areas in YouTube process of being monetized.
Firstly, the Note 20 allows you to switch focal perspectives mid-recording. The Note 20 really brings out the punch and contrast in color in video, and it's much more clearer compared to the A51 and A31 that wash out the shot periodically. Now, throughout this whole test, my mind was blown at how impressive the Galaxy A31 was in its shots. You've got a sub $200 phone that's going toe-to-toe with a $300 A51 and winning in a lot of areas. And at that, it's competing with a flagship $1,000 phone and beating it in some areas. The Note 20 at launch on pre-production software had its own issues, but the software updates up to now have found the lags and glitches to improve the camera experience. The A51, according to me, hasn't aged well at all. Don't get me wrong though, it's a good camera, it beats a lot more phones in this section in terms of overall performance and camera, even goes up against some flagships, but matching it against the A31 and the Note 20, it just doesn't hold its own properly. Almost feels like the A51 I compared to the A71 is different from the phone I used here. Yet, it's the same phone that's gotten even more updates. Overall camera experience across all 3 phones is okay. Thanks to One UI, the camera interface and layout is very similar across all 3 phones. You don't feel the switch in interface when moving from phone to phone. Next is going to be camera shutter speeds. Shutter speed on the Note 20 is fast, consistent, and the haptics just tie down the whole experience together. On the A31 it's okay, certainly better than the A51, since you can take pictures quickly back to back without that lag in shutter. But you'll definitely notice a difference when you shoot high megapixel max resolution photos. The A51 does offer a smooth experience, but you have to give it a second or two after taking each pic to allow it to process the image before you can see the pic or take the next picture. Screen technology also deals a hand in your experience. A picture shot on the A31 will look dim, less colored, less bright, less contrasty on the A31's Super AMOLED screen, but move it to the Note 20's Super LED AMOLED Plus display and it just looks and feels way better. I always say mid-range and budget phones are getting so good, and this test here proves it. That's been it. My name is Hezion. This is Lord Hezion. If you liked this video and found it helpful, smash that like button. If it's something you're into in 2020, share this video with your friends. Come hang out with me on Twitter and Instagram, and let me see you in the next one.